The crack of the whip against Olivia Sutton's skin felt like fire, but she refused to cry out. The blood dripping down her back was a testament to her defiance, a price she willingly paid for rejecting the hand of Maxwell Jenkins, a man 30 years her senior with a reputation blacker than the coal. He made his fortune mining in Colorado Territory, 1876. "You ungrateful child!" roared Thaddeus Sutton, bringing the leather down again across his daughter's shoulders. "Jenkins is offering $2,000 for your hand. $2,000! Do you know what that kind of money means to us?" Olivia gripped the wooden post of the barn tighter, her knuckles white with strain. At 22, she was hardly a child, though her father treated her as property to be bartered. Her mother had died 3 winters ago, and since then, her father's drinking had worsened, as had his temper and financial situation. "I won't marry him," she said through gritted teeth. "I don't care if he offers all the gold in Colorado." Another lash. "You'll do as I say," her father bellowed, the smell of whiskey heavy on his breath even from where she stood. "Jenkins will be here tomorrow to finalize the arrangement. You will smile, you will agree, and you will be grateful." From the corner of the barn, unseen by either Olivia or her father, Vaughn Prescott watched with a clenched jaw and a hand hovering over his revolver. He'd come to deliver a message from the telegraph office, something about a delayed shipment of farming equipment. But what he'd witnessed made him forget all about his errand. Vaughn was new to the area, having arrived in Delta, Colorado just 3 months prior. He'd purchased the old Miller Ranch outside town and was slowly building a respectable cattle operation. At 28, he was known as fair, hard-working, and not a man to cross. The townsfolk appreciated his quiet competence and the way he kept to himself, never causing trouble at the saloon like so many other ranchers. When Thaddeus finally stormed out of the barn, slamming the door behind him, Vaughn stepped from the shadows. "Miss Sutton," he said softly, his voice gentle but firm. Olivia startled, hastily pulling her torn blouse up over her bloodied shoulders. "Mr. Prescott," she gasped, mortification coloring her cheeks. "I didn't realize anyone was here," he said, removing his bandana and stepping forward. "Let me help you." She flinched away instinctively, and the action broke something inside him. "I won't hurt you, Miss Sutton. You have my word." Their eyes met her tear-filled hazel ones, locking with his steady blue gaze. Something passed between them in that moment, a seed of trust taking root. "I can't stay here," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "No," Vaughn agreed, "you can't." With gentle hands that belied his strength, he helped clean her wounds using water from the horse trough, his movements efficient but tender. Every wince from her sent a fresh wave of anger through him, but he kept his expression neutral. "Jenkins is a cruel man," Vaughn said quietly as he worked. "I've heard stories about how he treats his workers at the mine. No woman deserves to be his wife, least of all you." Olivia looked at him in surprise. They had exchanged pleasantries in town on occasion, nothing more. "You barely know me, Mr. Prescott." A small smile touched his lips. "I know enough. You teach the children at the schoolhouse. You help Mrs. Abernathy with her garden since her arthritis got bad. You sing in the church choir every Sunday." He paused. "And you deserve better than this." The kindness in his voice nearly undid her. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted. "My aunt in San Francisco might take me in, but I have no money for passage." Vaughn's jaw set with determination. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Sutton, one that might sound improper at first, but I assure you my intentions are honorable." She looked at him warily, and he hurried to continue. "My ranch needs a woman's touch. I need someone to help with cooking, keeping accounts, and making the place livable. I'm offering you employment, with your own private quarters in the house. You'd be safe there until you decide what you want to do." Olivia studied him, searching for deceit or ulterior motives, but found only sincerity in his weathered face. "Why would you help me? What do you gain?" "Peace of mind," he answered honestly. "I couldn't live with myself knowing I left you here to that fate." As the evening shadows lengthened across the barn floor, Olivia made the most important decision of her life. I'll need to pack my things. Can you be ready before dawn? I'll come with the wagon. Bruh. She nodded, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. One more thing, Vaughn said, his expression serious. I intend to ask your father properly for permission to employ you. Not tonight, he's in no state to be reasoned with, but once you're safely settled at my ranch, I'll return and speak with him man to man. I won't have anyone saying I stole you away like a thief in the night. Olivia almost laughed at the absurdity. He'll never agree. Perhaps not. But I'll have done the honorable thing, regardless. As Vaughn turned to leave, Olivia caught his sleeve. Thank you, she whispered, the words inadequate for the lifeline he'd thrown her. He tipped his hat, a gesture so simple yet so reassuring. Dawn, he reminded her, then slipped out of the barn. Olivia stood in the growing darkness, her back stinging but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since her mother's death, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous hope. The hours until dawn passed in a blur of careful packing and quieter tears. Olivia selected only what was truly hers, her mother's cameo brooch, a few dresses, her teaching books, and the quilt her grandmother had made. Everything else she left behind without regret. True to his word, Vaughn arrived just as the first pale light of dawn crept over the eastern mountains. His wagon was waiting beyond the tree line, out of sight of the main house where her father lay in a drunken slumber. Are you certain about this? Vaughn asked as he took her small carpet bag. Olivia cast one last glance at the only home she'd ever known, a place that had once held love and laughter when her mother was alive, but now contained only bitterness and pain. Yes, she said firmly. I'm certain. The journey to Vaughn's ranch took nearly 2 hours, the wagon bumping over rutted trails as the sun climbed higher in the clear Colorado sky. They spoke little, both lost in their own thoughts. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Olivia studied Vaughn as he drove the team. His profile was strong, straight nose, firm jaw covered in a day's stubble, eyes squinting slightly against the morning light. His hands held the reins with easy confidence, and she noticed a scar that ran along his right knuckles, white against his tanned skin. It was a branding iron, he said, catching her looking. I was 16 and careless. She blushed at being caught staring. Does it pain you still? Only when snow's coming, he replied with a small smile. The ranch appeared before them as they crested a rise, a sturdy 2-story house with a wide front porch, several outbuildings, and a corral where a half-dozen horses grazed. It wasn't grand, but it was well built and showed signs of recent improvements. It's not much yet, Vaughn said, a note of apology in his voice. I've been focusing on the cattle and haven't had time to make the house proper. It's wonderful, Olivia said sincerely. After the cramped, dilapidated cabin she'd shared with her father, Vaughn's ranch house looked like a palace. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, tall and lanky with a shock of red hair beneath his hat. That's Daniel, my ranch hand, Vaughn explained. He's a good man, fought for the Union in the war. He lives in the bunkhouse out back with Felipe, who helps with the horses. Olivia suddenly felt the impropriety of her situation with new clarity. What will they think of me being here? Vaughn's expression grew serious. They'll think you're a respectable woman who's been hired to help run the household, which is the truth. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. The firmness in his voice reassured her, though she still felt a flutter of anxiety as he helped her down from the wagon. Miss Sutton will be staying with us, Vaughn informed Daniel as the ranch hand approached. She'll be managing the household. To his credit, Daniel didn't so much as raise an eyebrow. He simply tipped his hat respectfully. Madam, it'll be nice having home-cooked meals again. Mr. Prescott tries, but his biscuits could sink a ship. The simple jest broke the tension, and Olivia found herself smiling. I'll do my best to ensure you don't drown at the dinner table, mister. Coleman, madam. Daniel Coleman. But just Daniel is fine. Vaughn led her into the house carrying her bag. The interior was plain but clean, with solid furniture and large windows that let in plenty of light. It smelled of coffee, leather, and pine. Your room is upstairs, first door on the right, Vaughn said. It has its own lock. Mine is at the end of the hall, and there's an empty one between. The kitchen's through there. Pantry's stocked as best I could manage. He showed her the rest of the house, pointing out what needed attention without apologizing for it. The tour ended in the study, where a desk held neat stacks of papers. I've been keeping the ranch accounts myself, but I'm better with cattle than numbers, he admitted. Your help would be appreciated if you're willing. Olivia ran her fingers along the edge of the desk. I taught arithmetic at the school. I can manage accounts. Vaughn nodded, then cleared his throat awkwardly. I should get back to work. The cattle in the north pasture need checking. Make yourself at home. We usually eat at sundown. After he left, Olivia stood in the center of the study, feeling both lost and found at the same time. This strange house, with its unfamiliar sounds and smells, represented both sanctuary and uncertainty. For the first time in her life, she was truly on her own, dependent on the kindness of a man she barely knew. She squared her shoulders, ignoring the pain that still radiated from her back. There was work to be done, and in work, she would find her footing. Olivia spent that first day taking inventory of the kitchen supplies, organizing the pantry, and planning meals. By the time the men came in for supper, she had prepared a hearty beef stew with fresh-baked bread, simple fare, but well-seasoned and filling. Miss Sutton, Vaughn said as he tasted the stew, I believe you've saved us all from my cooking. Daniel and Felipe, a quiet Mexican man with kind eyes, nodded enthusiastically. It's the least I can do, she replied, taking her place at the table after serving them. It felt strange to sit with men at mealtime her father had always expected to be served, never sharing the table equally. After supper, when the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Vaughn lingered in the kitchen as Olivia washed the dishes. I'll be riding to town tomorrow, he said, leaning against the doorframe, to speak with your father. Olivia nearly dropped the plate she was drying. So soon? Better to face it directly. I won't have him thinking I've abducted you or taken advantage. She turned to face him fully. He'll be furious. He might even be violent. I can handle Thaddeus Sutton, Vaughn said with quiet confidence. Olivia dried her hands on her apron, concern etching her features. What exactly do you plan to tell him? The truth, that you're working for me as my housekeeper, that you're being treated with respect, and that I'm formally asking his permission for the arrangement. And if he refuses? Vaughn's eyes hardened slightly. Then I'll remind him that you're of legal age to make your own decisions, and that certain authorities might be interested in how he treats his daughter. The implied threat to report her father's abuse should have shocked her, but instead, Olivia felt an unexpected wave of protection wash over her. No one had stood up for her since her mother died. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once, then pushed away from the doorframe. Get some rest, Miss Sutton. You've had quite a day. That night, in the unfamiliar bed with its clean sheets and thick quilt, Olivia lay awake for hours. Her back still stung, but the pain was fading. What remained was a tumult of emotions, fear of her father's reaction, uncertainty about her future, and a growing warmth whenever she thought of Vaughn Prescott's steady gaze and quiet strength. The next morning, after breakfast, Vaughn saddled his horse for the ride into Delta. He wore his good coat and had trimmed his beard, presenting a respectable appearance for his confrontation with Thaddeus Sutton. Be careful, Olivia urged as he mounted his chestnut gelding. My father can be unpredictable when he's angry. I'll be back before supper, Vaughn assured her, tipping his hat before riding away. The hours dragged by as Olivia busied herself around the house, cleaning windows and organizing cupboards. By mid-afternoon, she had taken to watching the road from the front porch, unable to focus on anything else. It was nearly dusk when she spotted a rider approaching, and her heart leapt to her throat when she recognized Vaughn's broad-shouldered silhouette against the setting sun. She hurried down the porch steps to meet him as he dismounted. His expression was grim, and her stomach tightened with apprehension. What happened? She asked, searching his face for clues. Vaughn handed the reins to Daniel, who had appeared from the barn, before answering. Your father was at Jenkins' office when I arrived in town. They were finalizing the marriage agreement. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, no. I interrupted their meeting and explained that you were now employed at my ranch. His mouth quirked in a humorless smile. They didn't take it well. Did he? Was there trouble? Vaughn touched his jaw, and for the first time, Olivia noticed the bruise forming there. Nothing serious. Your father tried to land a few punches, but he was 3 sheets to the wind already. Jenkins threatened legal action, claiming breach of contract. There was no contract, Olivia said quickly. I never agreed to anything. That's what I told them. I also made it clear that if Jenkins or your father attempted to force you into anything against your will, I would personally ensure the territorial marshal heard about it. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. You threatened Maxwell Jenkins? The richest man in Delta? I merely stated facts, Vaughn replied calmly. Jenkins may have money, but he also has secrets he'd prefer to keep buried, like how he acquired the Blackwater mine after its previous owner had an accident. Will they leave me alone? Olivia asked, her voice small. Vaughn's expression softened. For now. Your father demanded compensation, said I was stealing his property. His jaw tightened at the memory. I left him some money, not because I agreed with him, but because it seemed the fastest way to end the matter. You paid him? For me? Olivia didn't know whether to be grateful or humiliated. I paid him to recognize your right to make your own choices, Vaughn clarified. It's not the same thing. They walked together toward the house, the twilight deepening around them. Thank you, Olivia said finally. Not many men would have done what you did today. Vaughn stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, turning to face her. In the fading light, his eyes were serious. Miss Sutton, I want to be clear about something. My help comes with no expectations beyond the work we agreed upon. You're free to stay as long as you wish, and equally free to leave whenever you choose. This is a sanctuary, not another prison. His words, spoken with such sincerity, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. I understand, Mr. Prescott. Good, he said with a nod. Now, I believe I smelled apple pie earlier. The tension broke and Olivia laughed despite herself. You did. I found apples in the root cellar that were still good. Then let's not let it go to waste. As days turned into weeks, Olivia settled into life at the Prescott Ranch. The work was plentiful but satisfying, cooking, cleaning, mending, keeping the accounts. Her back healed completely, leaving only faint scars that would fade with time. More importantly, the constant fear that had been her companion for so long began to recede. She came to know the rhythms of ranch life, the pre-dawn breakfasts, the long days of physical labor for the men, the easy camaraderie at the supper table. Daniel taught her to play checkers, while Felipe showed her how to make traditional Mexican dishes that quickly became favorites. And then there was Vaughn. He was often gone from sunrise to sunset, working the cattle, fixing fences, or handling business in town. But in the evenings, after the other men had retired, he would often sit with Olivia on the porch if the weather was fair, or by the fireplace if it was cold. They talked of books they'd read, places they'd like to visit, childhood memories. He told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, losing his parents to influenza when he was 16, working on cattle drives in Texas before saving enough to buy his own land. She shared stories of her mother, her love of teaching, her dreams of someday seeing the ocean. What neither of them spoke of directly was the growing attraction between them, the way their hands would occasionally brush when passing a cup of coffee, how their eyes would meet and linger across the dinner table, the comfortable silence that would stretch between them, neither feeling the need to fill it with empty words. One evening in late October, as a chill settled over the Colorado highlands, Vaughn returned from town with a letter for Olivia. It's from San Francisco, he said, handing her the envelope. Your aunt, perhaps? Olivia's fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal. She had written to her Aunt Margaret weeks ago, explaining her situation in carefully chosen words, asking if she might come for an extended visit. Her eyes scanned the flowing script, and a small gasp escaped her. What is it? Vaughn asked, concern in his voice. She's inviting me to come stay with her, Olivia said, looking up from the letter. She's enclosed money for the train fare. She says I can teach at the girls' school where she's head mistress. Vaughn's expression remained carefully neutral. That sounds like a fine opportunity. Yes, she agreed, though her enthusiasm felt strangely muted. It's what I hoped for. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Olivia sat by her window, staring out at the moonlit landscape. The ranch had become home in a way she hadn't anticipated. The thought of leaving filled her with an unexpected sense of loss. And then there was Vaughn. In the quiet darkness of her room, she could admit to herself what she'd been trying to deny. She had developed feelings for him that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Did he feel the same? Sometimes she thought so, catching the way his gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. But he had been scrupulously proper in their interactions, never overstepping the boundaries of employer and employee. Perhaps that was answer enough, she thought sadly. If he had deeper feelings, surely he would have indicated them by now. The following day brought heavy work as a cold front moved in. The men worked frantically to secure the livestock and buildings before the storm hit. By mid-afternoon, snow began to fall, gently at first, then with increasing intensity. Olivia kept a pot of coffee hot on the stove and prepared a hearty stew for when the men came in. Through the kitchen window, she could see only white the world beyond the glass obscured by swirling snow. When the door finally burst open, bringing a gust of freezing air, Vaughn and Daniel stumbled in, their coats crusted with ice, their faces red from the cold. "Felipe?" Olivia asked anxiously, helping them remove their frozen outerwear. "Safe in the barn," Vaughn assured her, his voice rough from shouting against the wind. "He's staying there with the new foals. We've brought the cattle down to the sheltered pasture." They gathered around the kitchen table, warming their hands on mugs of coffee as Olivia served the stew. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. "First big snow of the season," Daniel observed. "Coming early this year." "It'll be a long night," Vaughn agreed. "We should check the animals every few hours." After supper, Daniel went to his room to rest before his midnight check, leaving Vaughn and Olivia alone in the kitchen. She was washing dishes when she noticed him wince as he removed his boots. "You're hurt," she said, drying her hands and moving to his side. "It's nothing. Twisted my ankle a bit coming down the north slope." "Let me see." Without waiting for permission, she knelt and gently examined his sock-covered ankle. "It's swelling. You should elevate it." Despite his protests, she helped him to the sitting room and arranged pillows for his leg on the ottoman before the fire. Then she fetched cold cloths to wrap around the injury. "You don't need to fuss," he said, though he didn't stop her ministrations. "Consider it payment for all the fussing you did when I first arrived," she countered, carefully positioning the cold compress. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Olivia was suddenly acutely aware of her hand resting near his ankle, of how close she was sitting to him, of the firelight playing across his features. "Have you decided?" Vaughn asked quietly. "About your aunt's invitation?" Olivia looked down, adjusting the compress unnecessarily. "Not yet. It's a wonderful opportunity." "But?" She hesitated, then found the courage to look up at him again. "But I found something here I wasn't expecting." "The ranch work?" he asked, though his tone suggested he understood her meaning perfectly well. "No," she said softly. "Not the ranch work." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, and somewhere upstairs a floorboard creaked with the cold. Outside, the wind continued its mournful howl. "Olivia," Vaughn finally said, the first time he'd used her given name, "I have no right to ask you to stay. San Francisco would offer you advantages I can't provide." "I'm not asking for advantages," she replied. "Only honesty." He looked into the fire, his profile strong in the golden light. "When I offered you sanctuary, I promised myself I wouldn't complicate things with my own feelings. You deserved freedom, not another man making claims on you." Her heart quickened. "And now?" Vaughn turned back to her, vulnerability plain in his expression. Now I find myself hoping you'll choose to stay, not out of necessity, but because you might feel something of what I feel for you." Olivia's breath caught. "And what is it that you feel?" His hand found hers, warm and calloused. "Something I never expected to find out here, something I've been fighting against because I feared taking advantage of your situation." "I'm not in that situation anymore," she reminded him. "Thanks to you, I have choices now." "Yes," he agreed. "You do." Olivia looked down at their joined hands. "I've been thinking about my aunt's offer and what it would mean to leave Colorado." She met his eyes again. "To leave you." "And?" The word was barely audible. "And I can't imagine it," she admitted. "These past weeks have been the happiest of my life, not because you rescued me, but because of who you are, honorable, kind, steady." She took a breath. "Because I've fallen in love with you, Vaughn Prescott." The confession hung in the air between them, irretrievable. For one terrible moment, Olivia feared she had misread everything, that he would gently disentangle his hand from hers and offer some kind of explanation of why her feelings were mistaken or unwelcome. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I love you too, Olivia Sutton. More than I thought possible." The simplicity of his declaration, the earnestness in his voice, brought tears to her eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her properly. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Vaughn pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay," he whispered, "not as my housekeeper, but as my partner in everything." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Prescott?" she asked, her voice teasing though her heart pounded. He smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Not yet. When I propose, I'll do it properly with a ring and on one knee, assuming this ankle heals." Olivia laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I would expect nothing less from a man who paid my father for permission to employ me." His expression sobered slightly. "Your father. If we were to marry, we should try to make peace with him. Family feuds have a way of poisoning happiness." The thought of facing her father again sent a chill through Olivia that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "Do you really think that's possible? After everything?" "I don't know," Vaughn admitted, "but I think we should try, for your sake. Not immediately, but someday." She nodded, appreciating his understanding of both the importance of family and her need for time. "Someday," she agreed. The blizzard raged for 3 days, keeping everyone confined to the ranch house. In that time, something new blossomed between Vaughn and Olivia, a comfortable intimacy built on the foundation of friendship they had already established. They were careful to maintain propriety, especially in front of Daniel and Felipe, but in private moments they allowed themselves the joy of newfound love-stolen kisses in the pantry, hands clasped under the table during meals, long conversations by the fire that lasted well into the night. When the snow finally stopped and the sun emerged, the world outside was transformed into a glittering wonderland. The ranch hands went out to check on the livestock, reporting minimal losses thanks to their preparations before the storm. "The pass to town will be blocked for at least a week," Vaughn told Olivia as they stood on the porch, surveying the snow-covered landscape. "No mail coach, no supplies." "We have plenty of provisions," she assured him, "and good company." He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "That we do." As December approached, Olivia wrote to her aunt in San Francisco, declining her offer of accommodation, but expressing heartfelt gratitude. She explained her changed circumstances in carefully chosen words, inviting Margaret to visit in the spring if she wished. Meanwhile, the relationship between Olivia and Vaughn continued to deepen. They learned each other's habits and preferences, their strengths and weaknesses. She discovered his unexpected talent for woodcarving. He found that she could recite Shakespeare from memory, a skill taught by her educated mother. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Vaughn broached a subject they had been avoiding. "Christmas is coming," he said, his fingers idly playing with a lock of her hair. I was thinking we might attend the church service in town. Olivia tensed slightly. They hadn't been to Delta since she'd left her father's home. People will talk. Let them, he said simply. We have nothing to be ashamed of. She knew he was right, but the prospect of facing the town's gossip and possibly her father still filled her with trepidation. What about Maxwell Jenkins? He has influence in Delta. Vaughn's expression hardened slightly. Jenkins's influence only extends as far as people's fear of him, and I'm not afraid. In the end, she agreed, recognizing that they couldn't hide away forever. The ranch was her sanctuary, not her prison. On Christmas Eve, with the road to town finally passable, Vaughn and Olivia rode into Delta in the sleigh, bundled against the cold. Daniel and Felipe followed on horseback, planning to enjoy the town's festivities while the church service took place. Delta looked like a scene from a Christmas card shop windows, decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, lanterns casting a warm glow on the snow-covered street, the church steeple rising white against the darkening sky. As Vaughn helped Olivia down from the sleigh, she felt eyes upon them. Neighbors and townspeople she'd known all her life watched with undisguised curiosity. She clutched Vaughn's arm tighter. Head high, he murmured, covering her hand with his. You've done nothing wrong. They walked toward the church, acknowledging greetings from those who offered them. Some faces were friendly, others reserved, a few openly disapproving. But no one confronted them directly. Inside the church, Olivia's anxiety peaked as they found a pew. Would her father be here? Would he make a scene? She scanned the growing congregation, not seeing him among the familiar faces. Just as the service was about to begin, the church door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Thaddeus Sutton. Her father looked older than when she'd last seen him, his face more lined, his shoulders slightly stooped. His gaze found her immediately, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. Vaughn's hand closed over hers reassuringly as Thaddeus made his way down the aisle. To her shock, he stopped at their pew. Olivia, he said, his voice gruff. Mr. Prescott. Mr. Sutton, Vaughn replied evenly. Would you care to join us? The invitation hung in the air for a tense moment. Then, with a curt nod, Thaddeus slid into the pew beside Olivia. The service proceeded, carols were sung, scriptures read, candles lit. Olivia barely registered any of it, acutely aware of her father sitting stiffly beside her. When it came time for the congregation to wish one another peace, she turned to him uncertainly. Peace, Father, she said softly. Thaddeus looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Peace, daughter, he finally replied. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. After the service, as people filed out of the church into the snowy night, Thaddeus cleared his throat. The house is quiet without you. Olivia glanced at Vaughn, who nodded slightly and moved a few steps away to give them privacy. I'm sorry it ended as it did, she said carefully. Her father looked down at his worn boots. Jenkins withdrew his offer after your departure, found himself a widow from over Montrose way. He shrugged. Probably for the best. The admission surprised her. Was this as close to an apology as he could manage? Yes, she agreed. Probably for the best. An awkward silence fell between them, decades of hurt and misunderstanding impossible to bridge in a single conversation. You look well, Thaddeus finally said. Prescott treating you right? Very well, Olivia confirmed. He's a good man. Thaddeus nodded, his expression unreadable. He paid a fair price for you. The words stung, reminding her of how her father viewed women as property to be traded. But she chose not to take offense, recognizing it was the only way he knew to express acceptance of the situation. "Will you come for Christmas dinner tomorrow?" she asked impulsively. "At the ranch?" Surprise flickered across her father's weathered face. "Don't reckon Prescott would want me there." "He would if I do," she said with newfound confidence. "And I do." Thaddeus considered this, then gave a small nod. "Might stop by." It wasn't much, but it was more than Olivia had hoped for. As she rejoined Vaughn and they walked toward the sleigh, she felt lighter somehow, as if a burden she'd carried for years had begun to ease. "Your father coming for dinner?" Vaughn asked as he helped her into the sleigh. "Maybe," she replied. "Would that be all right?" He tucked the blanket around her legs before climbing in beside her. "It's your home too, Olivia. Your family is welcome." The simple statement, "your home too," filled her with warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket or her heavy coat. As they drove through the quiet, snow-covered streets of Delta, Olivia leaned against Vaughn's shoulder, contentment washing over her. Christmas Day dawned clear and bright, the sun turning the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling expanse of white. Olivia woke early to prepare the holiday feast, a plump goose, potatoes, fresh bread, and an apple pie for dessert. Mid-morning, as she was setting the goose to roast, Vaughn appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression oddly nervous. "Might I borrow you for a moment?" he asked. Curious, she wiped her hands on her apron and followed him to the sitting room, where a small pine tree had been decorated with paper stars, strings of dried berries, and a few precious glass ornaments that had belonged to Vaughn's mother. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small package from behind a book on the shelf. "I wanted to give it to you privately before the others join us." Olivia accepted the gift, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. "But I haven't finished wrapping yours yet." "This isn't just a Christmas gift," Vaughn said, his voice low and serious. "It's a question." Her heart began to race as she carefully unwrapped the package. Inside lay a small velvet box, which she opened with trembling fingers to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," Vaughn explained, taking the box from her and dropping to one knee despite the hardwood floor. "Olivia Sutton. These past months have shown me what life can be with the right partner by my side. You've brought light and warmth to this house and to my heart. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred her vision as she looked down at this man who had saved her in more ways than one, not just from her father's cruelty, but from a life without love or partnership. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Vaughn. I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he murmured, "more than I have words to express." "Show me instead," she suggested, bringing her lips back to his. They were interrupted by a knock at the front door, Daniel and Felipe arriving from the bunkhouse with armfuls of gifts and hearty Christmas greetings. The men's genuine delight at the engagement announcement warmed Olivia's heart. "About time," Daniel declared, clapping Vaughn on the shoulder. "Never seen a man moon over a woman like this one's been doing." Vaughn actually blushed, making Olivia laugh with delight. As the day progressed, and the delicious smells of the Christmas feast filled the house, Olivia found herself watching the road for signs of her father. Part of her expected him not to come, to retreat back into his bitterness and pride. Another part hoped desperately for reconciliation. It was mid-afternoon when they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Vaughn squeezed her hand reassuringly as she went to the door. Thaddeus Sutton climbed down from his wagon, looking uncomfortable in what was clearly his Sunday suit, holding a small, crudely wrapped package. He'd made an effort to trim his beard and had combed his thinning hair. "Merry Christmas, Father," Olivia said, stepping aside to welcome him in. "Brought something," he mumbled, thrusting the package toward her as he entered the house. "Was your mother's." Inside the worn paper was a cameo brooch Olivia remembered her mother wearing on special occasions. She had thought it lost or sold during her father's worst drinking binges. "Thank you," she said, touching the delicate profile with reverent fingers. "This means a great deal to me." Dinner was initially a stilted affair, with Thaddeus offering monosyllabic responses to conversational overtures. But as the meal progressed and the wine flowed, he began to unbend slightly, even laughing at one of Daniel's outrageous stories from his cattle drive days. When Olivia and Vaughn announced their engagement, showing the ring, she held her breath, uncertain how her father would react. Thaddeus studied the pearl ring, then looked at Vaughn with narrowed eyes. "You asking my permission this time, Prescott?" "I'm asking your blessing, sir," Vaughn replied evenly, "but Olivia has already accepted my proposal." For a long moment the table was silent, tension crackling in the air. Then Thaddeus reached for his wineglass. "To my daughter and her intended," he said gruffly. "May you have more happiness than her mother and I managed to find." It wasn't effusive approval, but from Thaddeus Sutton, it was a declaration of acceptance. Olivia blinked back tears as everyone raised their glasses. Later, as her father prepared to leave, she walked him to his wagon. "Will you come to the wedding?" she asked. "It won't be for a few months yet, but we'd like you to be there." Thaddeus adjusted his hat, not meeting her eyes. "Expect so," he said finally. "A father should see his daughter married." Impulsively, Olivia hugged him, the first physical contact they had had in years that wasn't colored by fear. He stiffened, then awkwardly patted her back before climbing into his wagon. "He's trying," Vaughn said as they watched the wagon disappear down the snow-covered road. "In his own way." "Yes," Olivia agreed, leaning into his embrace. "And that's more than I ever expected." The winter months passed in a blur of happiness for Olivia and Vaughn. They set a wedding date for early April, when the worst of the winter weather would be past, but before the busy spring calving season began in earnest. Preparations kept Olivia busy sewing her wedding dress from fine fabric ordered from Denver, planning the wedding feast, arranging for the church ceremony. Vaughn, meanwhile, threw himself into improving the ranch house, adding a larger kitchen and expanding their bedroom. Word of their engagement spread through Delta, generating both congratulations and inevitable gossip. Some whispered that Olivia had set her cap for Vaughn from the beginning, trading one man's protection for another's. Others suggested Vaughn had taken advantage of a vulnerable young woman in his employ. But as the months passed and the couple was seen together in church, at the general store, and at community gatherings, most people came to recognize the genuine affection between them. The fact that Thaddeus Sutton had apparently given his blessing also silenced many critics. Maxwell Jenkins, still smarting from what he perceived as an insult, remained coldly distant when they encountered him in town. But even his influence couldn't dampen the community's gradual acceptance of the couple. On the first Sunday in April 1877, the small church in Delta was filled to capacity for the wedding of Vaughn Prescott and Olivia Sutton. Spring flowers decorated every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Olivia wore her mother's cameo brooch pinned to her cream-colored silk dress, her hair arranged in a corona of braids intertwined with tiny white blossoms. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes found Vaughn's, and everything else faded away: the murmuring congregation, her father's stiff posture, the years of pain that had led to this moment. All she saw was the man waiting for her at the altar, his blue eyes filled with such love that it took her breath away. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love, fidelity, and partnership that neither took lightly. When Vaughn slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady but his voice thick with emotion. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, the traditional words carrying the weight of his commitment. The reception at the Prescott Ranch afterwards was a joyous affair, with tables set up in the yard under budding trees. Neighbors brought dishes to share, musicians played fiddles and guitars, and children ran laughing between the adults. Olivia found herself watching her new husband as he conversed with guests, his easy confidence and natural leadership evident in every interaction. How different he was from Maxwell Jenkins, whose wealth might have provided luxury, but whose character would have made life intolerable. "You chose well, daughter," said a gruff voice beside her. Her father, slightly unsteady from too much celebratory whiskey, nodded toward Vaughn. "He's a good man." "Yes," she agreed softly. "He is." Thaddeus hesitated, then added, "Your mother would have approved." The words, so unexpected, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Father." He nodded awkwardly, then moved away to refill his glass. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was progress uneven and imperfect, like Thaddeus himself. As the afternoon waned into evening, guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Daniel and Felipe had arranged to spend the night in town, giving the newlyweds privacy at the ranch. When the last wagon had disappeared down the drive, Vaughn swept Olivia into his arms, carrying her across the threshold of their home, no longer employer and employee, but husband and wife. Later, as they lay in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Olivia traced the contours of her husband's face with gentle fingers. "Happy?" he asked, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she replied truthfully. "A year ago I was trapped and hopeless. Now I have everything I could want." Vaughn pulled her closer. "Not everything, perhaps. There are still dreams to fulfill, adventures to have." "Together," she murmured, resting her head on his chest. "Always together," he agreed. Spring gave way to summer, and the Prescott ranch thrived under their combined care. Olivia's management of the household and accounts freed Vaughn to focus on expanding their cattle operation, while her cooking and hospitality made the ranch a welcoming place for neighbors and hands alike. In late summer, as wildflowers painted the meadows in vibrant colors, Olivia received news that filled her with both joy and trepidation. She was expecting a child. She told Vaughn one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." "Are you pleased?" she asked, searching his face for reassurance. His answer was to pull her into a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it," he said when they finally parted. "I'm overjoyed, Olivia. Absolutely overjoyed." As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Vaughn became even more protective, taking on tasks he would normally have left to her, insisting she rest frequently. She indulged his concern up to a point, but remained determined to fulfill her duties as mistress of the ranch. "I'm with child, not ill," she reminded him one day when he tried to prevent her from hanging laundry. "Humor me," he replied, stealing the wet sheet from her hands. "I can't help worrying about you both." The gesture was so tender that Olivia couldn't find it in her heart to be truly annoyed. Instead, she redirected her energy to preparing for the baby sewing tiny garments, converting a small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, reading every book on child rearing she could find. Thaddeus, upon hearing he was to become a grandfather, showed up at the ranch with a rocking chair he had crafted himself, his first attempt at woodworking since Olivia's mother had died. "Not much to look at," he said gruffly, as Daniel and Felipe carried it into the house. "But it's sturdy enough." "It's beautiful, Father," Olivia said, genuinely touched by the effort it represented. "Thank you." When winter came again, bringing snow and bitter cold, Olivia was in her 7th month, her belly round beneath her woolen dresses. The baby was active, kicking and rolling at all hours, especially when Vaughn spoke or sang to it. "He knows his father's voice," Olivia said one night as they lay in bed, Vaughn's hand splayed across her stomach to feel the movement. "He?" Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "You sound certain." She smiled. "Just a feeling. Would you mind a son?" "I would treasure a son or daughter equally," he replied, his expression serious. "All I pray for is a healthy child and your safe delivery." February brought a difficult labor that lasted nearly 2 days. Vaughn paced outside their bedroom as Mrs. Abernathy, the town's midwife, attended Olivia. The older woman had moved into the ranch temporarily as Olivia's time approached, a precaution against being snowbound when the baby decided to arrive. When Olivia's cries of pain finally gave way to a newborn's wail, Vaughn nearly broke down the door in his haste to reach his wife and child. The sight that greeted him would stay with him forever. Olivia, exhausted but radiant, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she said, her voice weak but triumphant. Vaughn approached the bed with reverence, sitting carefully beside her and peering at the red, wrinkled face of his newborn child. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were the deep blue of all newborns. "He's perfect," Vaughn whispered, gently touching the impossibly small fingers. "You're both perfect." They named him Thomas James Prescott Thomas, after Olivia's beloved grandfather, James after Vaughn's father. From his first days, it was clear that Thomas had inherited his father's strong will and his mother's curious nature, watching the world with alert eyes from the safety of their arms. Parenthood brought new challenges and joys to their marriage. Sleepless nights were balanced by the wonder of watching their son develop day by day. Vaughn proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable changing diapers or walking a colicky baby as he was breaking horses or branding cattle. On Thomas's first birthday, they hosted a small celebration at the ranch. Thaddeus arrived early, bearing a wooden pull toy he had carved a horse with wheels that actually moved. "For the boy," he said, handing it to Olivia with uncharacteristic shyness, "when he's a bit older." The gesture touched her deeply. Her father had been making increasingly frequent visits to the ranch, gradually rebuilding their relationship. He was still a difficult man, prone to dark moods and occasional bouts of drinking, but he was trying for her sake and for his grandson's. That evening, after Thomas had been put to bed and their guests had departed, Olivia and Vaughn sat on the porch swing, enjoying the mild February night. "Hard to believe it's been a year already," Vaughn said, his arm around her shoulders. "Seems like just yesterday he was born." "And just yesterday that you rescued me from my father's barn," Olivia added, leaning into his embrace. "How much has changed since then?" Vaughn pressed a kiss to her temple. "Do you ever regret it? Not going to San Francisco? The life you might have had?" She turned to face him fully. "Never. Not for a single moment." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. "This is the life I was meant to have with you, with Thomas, with whatever the future brings us." "Whatever the future brings," he echoed, drawing her closer. The future, as it turned out, brought prosperity to the Prescott Ranch. Over the next 5 years, Vaughn's careful management and Olivia's shrewd business sense allowed them to expand their holdings, purchasing adjacent land and increasing their herd. It also brought 2 more children, a daughter, Margaret Rose, born when Thomas was 3, and another son, William Henry, who arrived 2 years after that. Their growing family filled the ranch house with laughter, tears, and the constant chaos of young lives being lived to the fullest. Thaddeus Sutton, to everyone's surprise, proved to be an attentive grandfather. He remained in his own home in Delta, but visited regularly, teaching Thomas to fish and whittle, bouncing Margaret on his knee, marveling at William's first steps. The bitter man who had once beaten his daughter for defying him gradually faded, replaced by someone softer, if not entirely transformed. One summer evening in 1885, as the children played in the yard, under Daniel's watchful eye, Olivia found Vaughn in his study, reviewing the ranch accounts. "The children are asking for a bedtime story," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Specifically, they want to hear how we met." Vaughn looked up, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. At 37, his hair showed touches of silver at the temples, and the Colorado sun had etched fine lines around his eyes, but he was still as handsome to her as the day he'd first helped her in the barn. "What version do you think is appropriate?" he asked, setting aside his ledger. "I'm not sure they're ready for the full truth." Olivia crossed the room to perch on the edge of his desk. "I was thinking we could tell them you were my hero who rescued me from a difficult situation, and that you asked permission the proper way, instead of just taking what you wanted." "That's true enough," he agreed, taking her hand and kissing it, though it leaves out quite a bit. They'll learn the rest when they're older, she said. For now they just need to know that their father is a man of honor, and that true love sometimes comes from unexpected places. Vaughn stood, pulling her gently into his arms. I thank God every day for bringing me to that barn at exactly the right moment. As do I, Olivia whispered against his lips before kissing him. Outside. Their children's laughter rose like music on the summer air, the sound of a family thriving, of love that had bloomed against all odds in the wild, untamed heart of Colorado. For Olivia and Vaughn, it was the sweetest sound in the world, the harmony of a life built together, day by day, choice by choice, beginning with that fateful moment when a cowboy had offered a beaten girl sanctuary and asked permission instead of simply taking what he wanted. In that choice, they had both found freedom, Olivia from her father's cruelty, and Vaughn from the loneliness he hadn't even realized was consuming him. Together, they had created something neither could have built, alone a home filled with love, respect, and the blessed chaos of family. And on nights like this, with the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Colorado sky, they knew with absolute certainty that they would face whatever came next, as they had faced everything so far, side by side, hand in hand, hearts beating as one.